In just a few moments, you're going to hear from the man who partnered with Zell to enter Brazilian real estate when they both formed Equity International back in 1999. He's Gary Garrabrant. Now, the world, according to these two gentlemen, goes like this. China and Brazil are the core of their outlook for housing growth. Both have an enormous rising middle class and a developing mortgage market. But what's got Gary traveling around the world these days is exploring the frontier markets, places like Colombia, Vietnam, India, Russia. They form the tip of their next big investments. And Gary, of course, is with me right now. He is the CEO of Equity International. And Gary, are you getting any sleep these days or what?
Very little.
Do you know where you are?
Shows.
Exactly.
Thank you.
You just recently stepped down as the chairman of Gafisa, right?
Yes.
Which is, I think, is the third largest Brazilian home builder.
Yes, and the only New York Stock Exchange listed.
Okay. Why did you step down?
Well, in our pattern, we build companies. We invested in Gafisa as a private company. Built the company into the first national Brazilian home builder. Mm-hmm. Took the company public locally, Bovespa, a year later, New York Stock Exchange.
Right.
Built a terrific management team, strong governance, independent board,
okay.
et cetera.
And that's your pattern with these companies?
That's our pattern,
okay.
yeah. And so it was time.
And you've done the same with Chinese companies as well, right?
We have, and maybe before that, even more to the point, Homex in Mexico also followed this pattern.
So does this, your stepping down at Gafisa, does that signal a turning point for your investments in that country?
No, not at all. Our enthusiasm remains at the highest level. We love the housing sector. The unmet demand for housing remains over 7 million units. Household formation is outpacing house production by a wide margin, which means that there's going to be this gap that continues to grow over the next 10 to 15 years.
I want to bring up, and I think we have this graphic for our viewers, which essentially shows the housing deficit. You mentioned the housing, the unmet demand, but there's a housing deficit statistics that you guys have provided us, which show that Brazil, if we have it up at 17.9 million in Brazil, you have Vietnam 20 million housing deficit, and then you go on and on with Peru 2 million there. So when you look at that, though, does that tell you that with Vietnam with 20 million, does that mean that that's your biggest market?
No, that's a little misleading. I think statistically that it may be true. However, other factors come into play. Affordability, access to mortgage capital. Vietnam has yet to establish a sustainable mortgage system compared to, say, a Mexico or a Brazil. We see Colombia actually as probably next to create to create such a system. Colombia is a country of 45 million people. That's about half of Vietnam, and yet, in our view, it's positioned to respond more quickly in a housing context.
Do you ever get any resistance from governments to developing a mortgage market at all?
To the contrary. This falls into the long-term positive infrastructure for countries creating a middle class. Drawing on feeding the aspiration of young people is a very good thing. We have yet to meet a government, frankly, and we don't. You
mean even after seeing what's happened here in the U.S., you never get any pause?
Well, I think we've got a good 20 years before we get to
before
this stage.
Things get screwy down there.
Yeah, I'm sure they will, but it'll be some time.
I know you guys travel sometimes, right, to these countries.
We do.
What was the last one that you and Sam visited?
We were in Brazil for a week, visiting various partners, both current and prospective.
All right. China is another one of your core markets, and a lot of people talk about the rising middle class in China. Is it as big an opportunity as some are saying it is?
Yes, we believe it is. China is vast, you know this, in population terms and land area terms. The amount of progress that's been made in such a short period of time is astounding.
But how would you compare China to Brazil?
Well, it's very different. I mean, the people are very different. We're in the partnering business. We have found amazing partners in Brazil in terms of their want to learn and to build serious companies alongside and for our purposes. In Brazil. In
What about China?
The first generation entrepreneurs are different, more challenging. They are much more patriarchal, one foot in communism.
And one foot in capitalism.
Yes, and struggling a bit with that.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Gary, because I do want to roll, because your partner, Sam Zell, was a bit more direct in saying this, and this is what he told me at that forum.
at this particular stage in China's evolution, if you go look at these guys who have got these companies up to this point, they're basically tyrants.
Tyrants.
Yes, well, that would be a descriptor. Bullies would be another, and we're collaborators, and we're building organizations, and so we're working tirelessly with these guys to build terrific companies, and it is a struggle. No
So it's
question.
more difficult to deal with these companies.
For certain. At the same time, the opportunity is vast. And we are eternal optimists, and we look ahead to the next generation.
Right.
Assuming we get there ourselves, the next generation of entrepreneurs are much more worldly and sophisticated, and we're very excited about that.
Right. I know you have one or several Chinese companies you've invested in. One is Xinyuan, which I think is one of the first ones that you invested in.
Yeah, as a home builder, and Jinrei, another privately held. Xinyuan being publicly traded, and Yupei, which is a privately held logistics
A lot of people talk
business.
of a bubble in China, housing bubble.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, again, we'll go back to the government influence on capital flows and the government's influence over the banks and providing capital to both corporate and
But you don't buy into it, though?
Well, from time to time, I think there are bubbles that get created. We see it. Our home builders are very sensitive to the cost of land. The economics have to work for our communities to work. And from time to time, there's too much capital in the system, which explodes prices. People who shouldn't be competing with us are competing with us, and then they recede as the government pulls back.
Gary, really quickly, what is the one market that you would like to be in that is just not ready yet?
Well, India is a market that falls into this category. We are intrigued with India, and yet the institutionalized corruption, bureaucracy, and our, to date, inability to find a partner committed to the highest standards, as are we, has thwarted our efforts in India.
Really?
We don't have enough time to tell all the stories, but it's a challenging place.
So you've talked to people, but you just haven't been able to seal the deal at all?
Oh, yeah. We've traveled there a number of times and continue to look.
Gary, thank you so much. I don't know where you're headed next, but is it another exotic location? Or
back to Brazil on Monday.
Back to Brazil. All right. Gary, good to talk with you. Thanks for stopping by
Great
here.
To be here.